When two people from the Greek diaspora get together in Western Australia, they will inevitably talk about sunsets, olive oil, and the similarities between Greece and WA. My name is Evan Chelios, and this is the SSI podcast where education, AI, and the future of learning come together. In this episode, I sat down with Manny Papadoulis, the executive director of Icon Tourism Consulting. And what started as a debate about olive oil and Rottnest Island, it ended up somewhere much more interesting. How do we keep the human connection alive in an era where AI is reshaping how we teach, how we learn, and how we work? And the thing that we both agreed on is that AI is already in the classroom. The question is whether we're teaching students to use it or whether it's using them. Let's get into it. I'm kind of torn apart. Sometimes I think that Greece is amazing. We have Santorini, Mykonos, and the beautiful sunset. But to be honest, the most beautiful sunset that I have seen, I hope that my Greek friends will forgive me about this, is just down here at the Cottesloe, just behind Rottnest. And especially June, July, when you have all these colors and blending together. That is one of the beautiful sunsets I've ever seen. Now, not to take away anything from Santorini, but what do you think?
I know exactly what you're saying. We spent 2 months living in Crete. So I took my children back and they went to school there and were living in Crete. And it was just sensational. And even though it was winter when we were there, we still had clear, sometimes 20, 21 degree days. But when I'm in Greece, I want to be back in WA, and when I'm in WA, I seriously think about Greece every day. Every day I think about it. I just, my grandfather's village. I subscribe to all the little newsletters, so I know all the gossip and everything that's going on. But just the beauty, and for me, the ruggedness of Crete, the mountain, where you can be sort of down and look across the vegetation and then up the mountains and then the snow. But Hanya, it's just beautiful. And the food is just beautiful. But then you come down to WA, you go down south, the food is sensational. The wine is sensational. The vistas, Esperance, that beach, white sandy beach and the contra. And one of my cousins came once, and we live in Carrinup, and we were on the beach, and I drove from sort of Scarborough all the way up to Sorrento, and then we're standing at Sorrento looking back, the sun's setting, and we had the beautiful sunset. And he's looking, he goes, Manoli, why isn't there more restaurants and hotels? And why don't we go in partnership? We'll build some tavernas down here. I said, it doesn't work like that, Yanni. It doesn't work like that. I said, there's lots of rules and stuff. But yeah, look, I agree. It's Western Australia. I wouldn't live anywhere else. We're very blessed. Our heritage is from one of the greatest countries in the world, and we're living in one of the greatest countries in the world.
There are two spots that reminds me vividly of Greece. One spot is as you come down to Scarborough to go down to Trig, there's this building that kind of gives you a feel of the Greek islands with the blue, green, and yellow. And you look around it, and then all of a sudden you make a turn and you go down to.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
That's amazing. And the other spot that I fell in love with is when you go down to Prevelly and you come down to the church.
Yep.
And as you go down and you look at the church on the left-hand side, it's kind of very picturesque and reminds you of Greece.
Yeah, I took photos to show my cousin, and I said, "Where's this in Greece?" And he started rattling off names. Yeah, dude. I said, "No, mate, this is in WA." And he goes, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." And Prevelly, the naming, and so I got married in that church, and my parents donated there's the icon of the Last Supper, which is over the door, which my parents donated in memory of my grandparents, my father's parents. Yeah, no, it is. It's the vista, and I've done things on social media where I've taken photos at the side of Rottnest, the water and the sand, and then got another similar shot in Greece or in Crete, and go, tell me which is which. And parts of Rottnest, unbelievably, just clear blue, crystal clear blue water on Rottnest onto the sand. And you just, if you frame it right, and then you take another one, I'll get one from Greece. It's amazing.
It's incredible, and that's the human side of it, and the culture that we bring into Australia. But
Yeah, look, yeah, they brought that to them to Australia. That has influenced Australian lifestyle. The eating, the food, the table lunches, the sharing, the bonding, the getting back to extended families. I've It's funny, first 100 years Australia families were big and extended and stuff, and then it dropped off and became very nuclear in the sort of 60s and 70s and 80s and and now it's coming back to sort of embracing your extended family again. And I think that's very much not just the Greeks; that's very much the Italians and other cultures that have
it
brought.
is that Mediterranean part, right?
Yes, that's it.
The relaxed, the stress free. I think it's the olive oil, maybe. I don't know. Maybe the air, the water. Something is in the air that they're doing that.
I tell you, we were living in when we were living in Crete, in the olive oil. And Kritsa, my grandfather's village, has won gold medals. Like they reckon it's the best in Crete, which makes it the best in Greece,
Mm.
which makes it's amazing olive oil. And they have this co-op, which was actually started by Konstantinos Papadoulis, the co-op, back in 1922. And we had just finished eating, and we were walking back, and it was olive picking season, and the factory runs 24/7 for about a month. And so they come and they just make them. And we heard the olive oil thing, and we looked in the window, and the guy goes, "Come in, come in." And and we we came in, and the olive oil was coming out, and he just grabbed the glass and he put it into where it was coming out, and he gave it to us, and we tasted it, and then I realized what olive oil was meant to taste like. Up until that point, I had never really tasted good olive oil, and I used to buy the best olive oil down south and stuff, but this was I've never tasted it that. And it's really, really, really hard to explain it to
Manny,
someone.
all you're doing at the moment is you just bring me back to Greece, and it's just enjoyable. And I think what the Greeks have brought to WA is the meaning of WA. You know, when I first got here, it was wait a while.
Yeah,
WA, wait a while.
yeah,
So I think the Greeks brought it over with when they came in. It's the way, the lifestyle. It's the way they communicate. It's the way the parea, which is very
that's
difficult to
the word.
explain.
Yeah, yeah,
The philotimo, which is another word that is very hard to explain.
plain.
It's
Yeah,
based on relationship, on this human basic relationship that we are now enjoying WA. Bringing you now into the future, AI has kicked in,
yes,
which has made us more efficient in doing our workflows,
absolutely.
but sometimes feels that it's taken away that humanity. I find it very hard to believe that the Yaya in Crete, when she goes up all the way to Psiloriti, to the mountain, to get that herbs, I don't think she's going to use AI to go and do that. And I don't think AI will ever be able to do that. But here we are, it's happening.
Look, AI now, and I suspect that for the next 20 years, is is a support tool. It's scary in some things, but it 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 won't replace the heart. And if it can replace the heart, we should not allow it to replace the heart. But right now, and in my industry, um, AI efficiency, research, marketing, it does all of that. But the essence of good tourism, which is shown in Greece, and Greece is one of the leading tourism nations in the world, is the human factor, right? It's taken people, modern tourism, 100 years old, bit more, 150 years old. They've just worked out what is modern tourism. Everyone used to think, well, I'll go and see the Eiffel Tower, or I'll go and see the Acropolis, or I'll go and see the Great Barrier Reef and I'll swim there. What it is, though, it's more than that. And the big attraction and the real attraction, and take it from me as a tourism professional 40 years, is the people engagement, whether it's with the hotel receptionist, whether it's with the taxi driver, whether it's with the waiter and the waitress, whether it's bumping into people and making new friends, maybe from other countries or maybe with locals. That is the attraction. That's what gets you to travel. The excitement of getting on board and getting there, etc. But once you're there, you read it now on posts. Oh, we had such a friendly host, and they welcomed us, and this, that, and the other. I had an Airbnb, and they came down and checked, and they bought me fresh farm eggs from their farm, and this is it's the human interaction. Right now, the mass tourism lost some of that, but it still had that. It still had that. You had your guide, you had your big groups, but you still had that. I came from a coach touring background, and in the 80s and 90s, the big thing was to put the tape on, and stop, and on your left is here, and you play the tape, and that way the owners of the business didn't have to get someone with personality trained up. All they had to get them was to drive. Well, that trend lasted a good sort of 10 years, but then in the end, people started getting rid of them because there wasn't that engagement. There wasn't that human. There wasn't that out of the square question. What about this? What about that? What's that over there? So that human reaction came back from that first. You could have called that even AI. That was sort of. It's still not as good as having the actual sort of human engagements. Now, will that be like that for another 5 years or 10 years or 1 year? I don't know. And it's rapidly going. But everything along the tourism line, the hotel, the taxi, the hotel, well, not even the taxi now because they have driverless taxis, but the hotel, the tour, the experience, the restaurant, the engagement, flying, etc. It still has that human element. And on many, many things with tourism, as with lots of other things, it needs a little bit more, not only creative thinking, but there's judgment, there's the ability there's emotional intelligence, there's the ability of ensuring that we are looking after our asset or our business, which AIs may vary from. There's this overall stuff. The way I use AI now, it helps. It's made my consultancy business extremely efficient. It's. I'll tell you my first engagement with AI as a consultant in my business. And I just started using ChatGPT. It was about, like I said, 3 years ago. And I went, I wonder if ChatGPT can sort of do a management plan. Here's this, and I put as much information in it. And then I prompted and I said, first do some research and find everything you need to make an internal management plan for this organised local council. That bit took me an hour. The actual management plan out of ChatGPT took about 40 seconds. And I looked at it, and a few things I had to correct, not a lot. And I had this management plan. At that point, it had taken me about an hour and a half. This whole thing's going to change. This is an industrial revolution on a major scale, exactly like the Industrial Revolution. Right. ChatGPT started on this date. 20 years later, the entire landscape is going to be completely and utterly different, like it was in the Industrial Revolution.
There is a place for AI, and the efficiencies and all the procedures that you just described. There is a place for AI, but I want to bring you back to WA and learning from what we know from Greece being the best tourism destinations in the world, one of the best tourist destinations in the world. How we as Western Australians are showcase our destinations? Are we educated enough to do that?
So, and this is the trick with AI at the moment. So AI can do tons of marketing, can describe, but if you haven't got the experience, if you hadn't been there, if you hadn't known little things like, the road as you come in is a bit bumpy on this side, and if you lean to the right, you won't get a flat tire, but if you keep to the left, you're going to get, which doesn't come up into the, if you don't have that knowledge and that experience and that understanding, if you don't know all of that, it it won't be as effective. So you need people with the knowledge, the experience, the understanding of what a tourist is looking for. What I say now to the millennials that will listen to me, you need to have seen the whites of tourism's eyes before you can really be an efficient tourism marketer. In other words, go and live the experience, one thing, but better still, within Western Australia, serve the tourists. So, be 12 months, be a tour guide, do a walking tour, run a function centre, run a restaurant, work in a restaurant, work in a tourist restaurant, work at an attraction, work with an Indigenous operator and see how they engage and what. Unless you have that understanding, you're not going to be able to use these amazing tools efficiently within Western Australia. The other tools in terms of getting, and one really good thing, there's about 30,000 tourism related businesses in Western Australia, right? Now, the government getting its head around that and who they all are has always been a nightmare. That database sort of management. Now, with AI, it's up to date, it's efficient. They know it. Beautiful thing. You know who's in, who's out. Can update your list. You don't need 4 people actually ringing or making calls. You can get it all off the internet. It can be so that's a really good thing. It's the database data of information. Interpreting statistics and data is another thing. But even with that, you need to have an understanding. So you get a lot of data points and or information. Like a couple of days ago, the national visitor stats came out: inbound, outbound, what countries they were coming from, what's increased. A ton of information. I now take all that and I put that into an AI and say, summarize that for me in a page. It summarizes. And here's the beauty. Now, at that particular point, if you know nothing about tourism or you've never experienced tourism, you say, great, this is good. Because I've had the knowledge and experience, I go, hang on, what do you mean Vietnam has started going more into Sydney? What's behind that? You got to be able to have the experience to ask the questions to be able to then get the answers out of AI. AI will take the data, save you 2 days, analyze it, trends, graph it up, do everything you need. Boom. You then review that. So you've saved yourself 2 days already. And then the third day, you would have been, after you'd analyzed and pulled all that, you would have been doing this next step, which is what is the meaning behind the data? What are the underlying trends? What are the hidden things? And because you have the knowledge, you can then ask the questions of the AI, or you go and find the answers somewhere else because the AI might not know the answer. And it may be picking up the phone and going, hi, John, I've noticed in Kalbarri that there's more Chinese coming. You run the boat canoeing tours up in Kalbarri? Yeah, I do. Are you seeing more Chinese? Yeah. Where are they coming from? Are they families? That last bit AI hasn't got yet because it hasn't got the ability to know intimately relationships with people, to be able to pick up and get information direct from the person who's actually living the product, right? And from a consulting perspective, or from if you're what we call an STO, like a state tourism organisation or a local tourism organisation, and you're wanting this, even today, even with the technology, with AI, they've just finished last week in Adelaide what they call the Australian Tourism Exchange. Australian Tourism Exchange It's the third biggest trade show in the world, biggest in the Southern Hemisphere. And it's when buyers, wholesale, agents, people who sell Australia, people in charge of technology that sells Australia, they actually come and look for themselves and talk with the owners of tourism businesses. And there was a lot of suppliers, small, big, large, 6-star hotel, bed and breakfast, little canoe operator, little coach tour operator, big boat operator off the Sunshine, off the Gold Coast, you know, everything. And they are engaging one-on-one with another person. And they, right now, there is a technology to make that you could wipe out the show. Everyone could have their own bot, and all the bots from the buyers can talk to their bots, and but it wouldn't work. They'd be deals would be done, but not necessarily the best deal for the buyer and or the seller, right? So they have been predicting the demise of this trade show for 20, 30 years. When email came, they went, "Oh, ATE won't have to do it because it's very cheap now to make contact." When the voice, what do you call it? Online, what we're doing now, became when that became cheap. Oh, they won't do ATE because they can.
Yeah.
They're
Well,
still
it's not the same doing virtual and being in a trade show.
well.
You don't get
This
the energy of the people.
exactly, and you look and you observe how this person reacts, how they engage, but more than that, collectively, this is the biggest thing: the human spirit, the industry, the family, of the industry. The people have known each other for 10, 15 years, who trust them implicitly, who shifted from this company to that company, is now telling them, "Listen, I shifted because of this, and I can do this now for you where before I couldn't." All of that will never, in my opinion, be replaced by AI. That is the human contact. That's why I love the tourism industry. That's why the tourism industry, that's why I joined it. That's why most of the people in tourism are in tourism. They love people. They love engagement. Why is it Greece's biggest industry? Because of the philately. They love people. They love hosting people. Now, the Australian Tourism Exchange can all be done online. 50, 60, maybe 80% of it could be done by bots now. You have your own bot that represents your company. You fill it with all the information, and it can engage with another bot who's putting tours together. Those two bots can talk. That technology is available today, right? It can be done like that. That technology over the years will become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. But every time the Australian Tourism Exchange communications has become cheap and efficient, we should get rid of ATE. Didn't happen. Online, in-person conference calls, we should get rid of ATE. Didn't happen. We did it virtually. They'd had a virtual session when COVID happened. So there was all these things. You had to sit behind your desk and all around the world, and they engaged and they moved and they did their bit. Didn't work. Wasn't there. There wasn't this collective. Now, I can make 3 phone calls now, 4 phone calls to people, let's say half a dozen, as I've done, to people who attended ATE. Some are buyers, some are sellers. Pick one from each state. And I get a better understanding as a consultant of what the next 12 months is going to look like. Better than any data analyzed by AI can give me. Because the data analyzed by AI, I still have questions of. Well, those questions, I'm getting straight answers from people on the ground in market. What's happening in Germany? What are travel agents doing? What's happening online in Germany or in Singapore or whatever?
Having the finger on the pulse in the international tourism, it's one of the main priorities that as a tourism professional you should have. But
absolutely,
Manny, I'm going to ask you a little bit of a personal question, right? We're in WA, And
Yeah.
we both love WA. We're from here. We love the scenery. But if you were to rank WA in all the other states, where are we at? Are we?
I I preface the answer to this question um, uh, that this is a personal opinion,
Mhm.
and not an opinion from Tourism WA, who I serve as a board.
Obviously, we're biased.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
are biased.
But
But if we were
but
going to put
yeah,
push WA, because the next question that I'm going to follow up with you is the educators and how we're going to encourage our youngsters, the Gen Z that is coming out, with the teachers. What kind of qualification do they need? Because you mentioned before, right? We mentioned that you need to go out there. You need to be part of a tourism experience. You need to be serving a tourist at the destination. If you don't have that experience as a teacher, as a trainer, how are you going to pass it on to the new generation? And how are we collectively going to rise and bring up the level of service in WA, which at some point, and probably you know better than I do, is lacking. So is WA ranking high enough in your preference? And what
I
do we
think
need
the
to do to
leading
fill the gap?
in the last, and this is an honest answer, just leading up to COVID, WA was starting to get its momentum. Right, we competing against other states. We started to compete uh, effectively. Queensland's always held up as the tourism state in Australia. They got tourism from sort of Sunshine Coast to Cairns. They've got the reef. They've got the water, beaches, and they're very much like Western Australia because they have agriculture and mining as well. But they have always been the first. So they were first to grab the Japanese market back in the 80s. They were the first to grab the other markets. They're always first investors. So up until COVID started, we were starting to hit our straps. Coming out of COVID, um, we were the fastest state to start getting our market share back and internationals come. We were the first in Australia to hit our international pre-COVID international numbers, and the first time ever that we hit 1 million international visitors in October, 12 months up to October 2025. We hit 1 million international visitors. So we're up there. I've got to say, it's become very competitive. I would have said in 5 years we'd be the number one state, but Queensland's now pushing back because we invested a lot into events, into direct flights and access, making it easier for people. Because our biggest problem in Western Australia is we have the best and we have everything that any other state has. We just don't have snow, but we have wine. We have upmarket wine in Margaret River. We have ocean. We have more beaches than any other state. We have product close to the capital city. You can swim with dolphins half an hour down the road at Rockingham. You can be in a city and get to a winery in 45 minutes. So we've had all that, and we started to move forward. COVID came. We've come back quicker. So the competition is steep, but we're still holding our own. We're still doing very well. And this government, our investment in tourism in the last 7 or 8 years has gone from sort of here to here. We used to invest $5-10 million in events. We now invest $75 million in events. We used to have $4 or $5 million to hand out to airlines to try to entice them to come to Western Australia. We have over $50 million, $75 million some years to try and entice. So we've invested it. We're doing well. How do teachers, I suppose, convince people about tourism and hospitality? Let's start with hospitality. Still, let's start with just hospitality because it is different. It's a subset of tourism. Hospitality in Europe, Greece, Italy, France, Spain. A waiter is considered an honourable profession that you can do your entire life, that you can earn, exceptionally good money on. Now, they have different systems in hospitality, and until we start to be. For example, in France, if there's a coffee shop or a restaurant, the waiters are divvied up 4, 5, 6, 7 tables. They're your tables. They're your tables. They're your tables. They are paid a low-based hourly rate, but they get 20% of all the food and alcohol consumed or drinks consumed in their 7, 10 tables. Total price, they get 10%. No, 20%. What does that do? That ensures that the waiter is going to sell the desserts like you've never sold the desserts before. That waiter is going to push them to take this bottle of wine rather than this bottle of wine, and they become experts at it. And there's a service ethic and an understanding. Still in Australia, when I started in tourism, it's always talked about we've got to get away from hospitality being just when you go to uni, right? Which everyone did. All my mates, when we went through uni, worked in bars. And unfortunately, the structure, not that, should waiters be paid what they're currently paid? Of course. But there's no incentive for the waiter to smile. But changes in hospitality, new types of events that are happening, there's a lot of excitement in running a hospitality venue, and there's some young people that are doing exceptionally well in hospitality. Tourism is just the next step above that, right? But the attraction is the human engagement and spirit. So if you're a student that is wanting to learns better by watching and observing, tourism is for you. If you're a student that doesn't like data, there's an appeal for a certain type of person for tourism. And we're in Australia, and West Australia is leading on this. We are leaning into an environmental footprint, how big it is, preserving, only leaving footprints in the sand. Tourism in itself is changing. That mass tourism model, it's even changing in Europe. They've started, stop, let's just have a look at this. We don't want mass tourism. We don't want people forced out of their homes. So they're looking back to either expand into other places, or they're changing the nature of their tourism product. A bit more upmarket, lean and green. There's a lot of people. The Scandinavian countries, the Germanic countries, they check where they're staying. If the hotel's not green, they don't want to stay there. If it's so that whole green's changing. But tourism is one of the very few industries that can protect the environment done properly. Okay, you can give me 1,000 examples where it hasn't. Bali. But if tourism is done and managed properly, if the government and local government are involved and they manage, it can protect the environment. Not too many industries can protect the environment. Tourism can, because that's what we want to sell. It can protect the environment. It can help world peace, right? That's a big call. But the more people from other countries and other cultures engage with each other, the more understanding they get from each other, the less chance you're going to send drones bombing each other. That, as I said, is being tested as we speak in a couple of wars. But it's an industry that has been around, and this is a true story. It is just as a factual point. Alexander the Great, you'll be interested. Once he conquered Turkey, right? He conquered Turkey and he set up tourist routes to bring people out of Greece into Turkey. And he had packaged tours. You pay one price and you got taken into Turkey, all your food, your accommodation, saw the sights of Turkey, went back. 1 year they reckon that he moved 100,000 people from Greece on these 6-7 week journeys to see the conquered land. That's your first tourist. That's 200-300 years ago. I've got an academic textbook that I often quote that I found that one day in there. And so it's been around since, BC. Tourism has been around since BC. Thomas Cook modernized it. He was the one that went, hang on, there's a big business here. During the Middle Ages, it was even still around, but only for the absolute elite who would go and do their European tours. The aristocracy out of England would go and spend a year in Italy and a year in Paris. But then when Thomas Cook came, he opened up tourism to the whole world, to the masses. You could buy a ticket, go up on the train, stay overnight, have the meal, etc. And the way he got into that was that the train had empty seats, and he was in charge of filling the train, and he thought, how can I do this? Was discount the train fare but package it all up. So even from him, then all the ways to when the 50s and the 60s, mass tourism really started into the 70s.
What is the one advice for the young generation coming up? What is the one advice that you can give them to hype them up and tell them that tourism is a way of life and you're going to learn a lot of skills and you're going to progress in life?
I would get teachers to start to teach, and it's very hard. It's extremely hard because I have it with my own children. The value of human connection, the ability to put down your phones. Don't ignore AI. And you don't have to be a tech nerd. I mean, there are teachers who are going to be so far ahead with AI and they're on top of it, and the teachers that are just trying to fight against it. These guys, you ain't going to fight against it, right? I had this discussion with my daughter who's 19. Now she's not doing tourism, but she's doing sports international management. She's an athlete. She's a runner. She's an 800-meter runner. And if Australia won't take her, Greece definitely will for the Olympics. So she's an 800-meter runner. She's gone to ECU, and she's studying international sports management, and that sets her up to work for football teams, sports teams, events, stadiums, etc. And her part-time work, is she works at the stadium, so she's learning underneath what's happening. And again, interesting, the stadium. When she started, she got the job at the stadium, and she goes, and she'd been to lots of football matches, and she goes, Dad, do you know there's 1,500 people underneath the stadium? I argued with her, and I said, I reckon exams should be no computers, no phones. Ask the question, pen and paper, you write the answer, right? Because it's got to be about your knowledge, right? She goes, Dad, that's ridiculous. When I go out to get employed, my employer expects I know how to use AI. I know how to enhance their business better from AI. And if you're not going to let me learn that at school, where am I going to learn it? So look, I think at the end of the day, and Tourism WA have done a lot of work on it, is getting to the students and getting them exposed to what tourism actually is.
It's a very good advice. And thank you very much for joining me today. Great insight on WA tourism. And I hope to see you at the conference.